The fever came in waves, stealing Renault Maugrein's strength and soaking his sheets in sweat. He lay in bed, limbs heavy and burning, while Satan, ever dutiful and calm, sat by his side, pressing a cool cloth to his brow. The man who had taken such a sudden and vested interest in Renault's future now tended him with an almost unnatural attentiveness. Of course, Renault didn't know the truth. He didn't know that behind Satan's kindly eyes lurked the calculating gaze of Balnazar. "The fever will break," Satan murmured, lifting a silver chalice to Renault's lips. The water was cool and tinged with a strange metallic taste. "And it will soon be time for you to choose." Satan gently cupped the young man's head, his voice smooth as silk. "It is a necessity. You are a natural leader, Renault. A man like you should be in a position of influence, of power. I've told Alexandros this, and what was the High Lord's reply? That you were a loyal soldier, and that's all. A soldier, Renault. A follower. That's how he sees you." The words struck deeper than any fever. Renault's eyes tightened. He had bled for his father's approval, thrown himself into battle again and again to prove his worth. And still, Alexandros barely saw him. A ghost in his father's world, while Darion basked in love and praise. He makes speeches that change nothing, and he sets off on these fool's quests. Renault muttered, jaw clenched, face slick with sweat. Yes, as he does even now at Capital City. Or should I say, what's left of it. Far to the south, the wind swept across the ruins of Capital City, what had once been the heart of Lordaeron. Alexandros Maugrain, accompanied by Tyrosus, Fairbanks, and Brigida Bendis, crouched low in the underbrush, their cloaks rippling in the breeze as they observed the eerie procession below, from the concealment of bushes a distance away from the entrance. Carts creaked and groaned as they were pushed toward the city gates. Two grotesque abominations flanked the entrance, their bulging forms swaying with every step. These liberated undead had been toiling for weeks, but to what end? Bridget asked, eyes narrowing. They are calling themselves the Forsaken, Bridget, Alexandros replied, his voice heavy with caution. And I suspect they intend to take Lordaeron's old capital as their own. Bridget's armored fist clenched. Whatever they call themselves, I say we attack the worm-ridden filth now, before they are fully entrenched. But Alexandros shook his head. Did you learn nothing at Stratholme? These are not mindless drones like the Scourge. No, this new enemy is calculating, organized, disciplined. I agree they must be dealt with, but it will take a superior force to do so. If your father's right about Tyr's Hand, we may recruit additional personnel from here. Once we've amassed an army, we will obliterate them, but not before. Frustration colored Bridget's voice. What are we to do until we amass those forces needed? We establish a defensible position nearby, Alexandros said, a forward base. As they pressed north toward the shadowed trees of Tirisfal Glades, the conversation turned to strategy. Moss hung low, and the air was thick with the damp scent of decay and rain. The monastery stood not only as a great center of enlightenment, Alexandros said as he led them along an overgrown path, but a secluded, sacred place of worship as well. In my youth, I spent many months walking its cloisters, studying in the libraries and praying in its chapel. We should be upon it at any moment. Just as his words faded into the mist, someone behind him sniffed the air and tilted their head. Does anyone else smell meat cooking? The others paused. The scent was unmistakable, rich, smoky, and strangely inviting. And in a place like this, that was never a good sign. Night draped itself over the ruined landscape as the group finally approached the gates of the Scarlet Monastery. Moonlight spilled across the stones and the haunting smell of roasted meat lingered in the air. I smell food as well, Alexandros said, narrowing his eyes as he studied the darkened structure ahead. Have the men spread out and search the grounds for signs of the Scourge. Tell them to be thorough. The property is sizable. They are to report any discoveries immediately. The monastery loomed before them, shadowed but still stately, its spires stabbing into the night sky. They stepped cautiously inside. The stone floor echoed beneath their boots as archways framed their path forward. At the far end of the hall, firelight flickered, casting dancing silhouettes. It looks as though we're not alone. 'Tis as you say, Fairbanks. Someone has taken up residence here. Perhaps a wayward member of the Order or... Alexandros began to say before one of his men called out to say they found a troll hiding in the passageway. Without hesitation, Bridget suddenly surged forward, putting one hand around the troll's throat and making a fist with the other as she shouted, "You'll pay for defiling sacred grounds, blasphemer!" The troll opened his mouth to explain, but Bridget wasn't listening. Her fist clenched, poised to strike, until Tyrosus caught her wrist mid-swing. He has a right to be heard. "Unhand me, Tyrosus, or risk losing your good eye," Bridget snarled, wrenching her arm free. "Enough, both of you," Alexandros thundered. "The troll will be allowed to speak." Breathing heavily, the troll bowed his head in gratitude. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with emotion. He explained that he had wandered into the monastery many months ago seeking shelter. He started reading the books left in the library. He began reading and then praying. Over time, something within him had shifted. "I started to pray with all my heart," the troll said, eyes wide, calling out to the light, and the light, it answered me. It opened my eyes. It set me on a new path. Alexandros stepped forward and gently placed a hand on the troll's forehead. A soft glow pulsed between them. "The light has indeed blessed him," Alexandros said solemnly. "His life will be spared." Bridget scowled. "Blessed or not, his kind has no place with us." The troll only bowed once more. "Thank you. Thank you," as he quietly watched the group continue their search through the ancient halls of the monastery. Back at Hearthglen, as the pale dawn light broke over the hills, Darion Mograine approached Satan in the chapel. The Lord Commander stood with an air of composed fatigue, his features drawn and pale. "Myself and the others are set to depart for Tyr's Hand, Lord Commander," Darion said. Satan offered a faint nod. "Renault is still not feeling well, and I am also feeling a bit ill myself, so I will stay behind." Darion looked toward the barracks with a furrowed brow. "I would like to say goodbye to Renault before we leave." Satan stepped forward and gently placed a hand on Darion's shoulder. "Hold, Brother Darion. Renault is sleeping. Moreover, I fear close proximity will only result in your sharing his malady." Looking back at him, Darion gave a respectful nod. "Of course, please extend my wishes for a speedy recovery, and to you as well, Lord Commander." "Thank you," Satan said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "And travel safely. May the light guide you all." With that, Darion departed, his bootsteps fading beyond the doors. Once alone, Satan turned and made his way through Hearthglen's quiet corridors to Renault's chambers. The room was dim. Renault sat curled on his bed, his knees drawn to his chest, arms braced against them. One trembling hand pressed against his face. His eyes were wide with pain and confusion, jaw clenched as though every breath was a battle. "I don't feel well. He stammered. "You should have more tea," Satan interrupted, his tone firm but calm. Renault didn't move. His head was spinning, thoughts slipping like water through his fingers. He didn't even reach for the cup on the bedside table. Darkness coiled in his mind, deepening with every moment. "I have made contact with our enemies. We have arrived at a mutually beneficial arrangement, but the window of opportunity is narrow and will soon draw to a close. If you are to embrace your future, if you are to prove your worth, prove your father and all the others wrong, then the time to act is now." Renault's breathing grew shallow. He clutched at his head with both hands, overcome by a swirling storm of doubt and dread. The shadows around him seemed to lengthen, as if reaching out to claim what was left of his will. Back at the monastery, Alexandros stood outside beneath a rising sun as one of his soldiers returned from the outer perimeter. "We've completed our search, High Lord. Nothing additional to report." "Good. Now it's time to begin setting things here in order. Fairbanks and I will rendezvous with the others at Hearthglen and apprise them of recent developments. Bridget, you're in charge here while we're gone," Alexandros said, mounting his horse. Fairbanks was quick to follow, and soon the two rode off together, hoofs kicking up dust as they disappeared into the Tirisfal wilderness. Later that day, near the eastern border of the glades, their journey continued in silence until Fairbanks pulled his cloak tighter and grumbled, "This chill wind cuts to the bone. Perhaps if we were traveling on a full stomach." Alexandros rolled his eyes but smiled. "Fairbanks, I swear if I were to hand you a sack of gold, you would complain of its weight." With a grin, Fairbanks chuckled. "Well now, Lord, that's a theory I would happily put to the test." Their laughter faded into the quiet rhythm of hooves and rustling leaves as they rode through the area. The air was still when suddenly a distant shout broke the calm. They turned sharply to see a rider galloping fast behind them. It was Renault. He pulled up hard beside them, his face wild with urgency. "It's Darion, taken in battle. He's being held even now in Stratholme. General Bendis has led a responding force, but the tide turns against them." Alexandros tensed in the saddle. "What of Darion? Still alive?" "Being held to ransom, I'm told," Renault said, breath ragged. Without hesitation, Alexandros wheeled his horse around. Yelling back to Renault, he says, "Follow the northern road to the old monastery. Tell Lady Bendis and the others to meet us at Stratholme immediately. Fairbanks, we ride." The two men spurred their mounts and thundered towards Stratholme with grim urgency, vanishing into the horizon. Renault remained behind, fists clenched as he watched the silhouettes of his father and Fairbanks shrink into the distance. "Yes, you ride to the ends of the earth for your precious Darion," he muttered bitterly. "Tell me, father, would you have done as much for me?" Fairbanks and Alexandros raced through the blighted lands, their horses straining beneath them. Over the crumbling span of the Thondoril River, the wind howled through the broken trees of the eastern Plaguelands. The once proud road was now nothing more than a scarred memory of stone and ash, but they pressed on, their pace unrelenting. Their breaths came heavy, hooves thundering toward the skeletal skyline of a city in ruin. "There, Stratholme! But where are the others?" "We are not too late?" "I pray we are not too late," Alexandros said, eyes wide as he stared toward the shattered gates of the city. "Look!" Fairbanks cried out, raising a trembling finger. A black tide poured from the ruins, a vast swarm of the Scourge. Their numbers immeasurable, their hunger palpable. The two riders skidded to a halt atop a low rise as the horror swelled around them. They were surrounded, alone. "Who? Why?" Fairbanks whispered, looking around, panic rising in his voice. Alexandros drew the Ashbringer with a defiant flare. The sword's holy light shone like a beacon in the gloom. "No time to ponder, old friend. Time now only to fight or die." He spurred his horse forward, and Fairbanks followed with a battle cry of his own. The two dove into the heart of the enemy like twin storms, steel and magic flashing in the dark. "We must battle our way to higher ground," Alexandros shouted as he took down a ghoul with a single mighty swing. Fairbanks obeyed, casting holy light in bursts that sent corpses flying, his voice rising in prayer with each surge of power. Alexandros fought like a man possessed, Ashbringer cleaving through scores of the damned. "There are too many!" Fairbanks cried, the light around him flaring. "Courage, Fairbanks! Do not lose faith!" Alexandros roared, decapitating another foe with a single blow. Suddenly, an abomination loomed over him. A jagged chain with a rusty hook sailed through the air. It missed its mark, but it struck Alexandros' horse, sending the beast toppling. Alexandros tumbled free, rolling to his feet. He roared and charged, plunging the Ashbringer through the creature's skull and ending it with divine fury. Behind him, a sudden burst of blinding light lit the battlefield. Fairbanks, channeling the light with everything he had. The brightness surged, but the tide of death was unrelenting. Alexandros turned in time to see his friend dragged beneath the mass of corpses. "Fairbanks!" he shouted, lunging forward, but clawed hands gripped his shoulders, dragging him back. "Damn you, cursed wretches!" Alexandros bellowed, straining against their weight. "Tell your master that 1,000 of his minions will not suffice. I will deliver you all, and when I am done, I will stand against 1,000 more!" With renewed fury, he hurled them aside, reclaiming his blade and carving a path through the darkness. Ashbringer sang with each swing, its light cleaving through the filth of undeath. Exhausted, bloodied, and barely standing, Alexandros fought on. The scourge fell like wheat to a farmer's scythe. Hope flickered at the edge of his vision, until a monstrous abomination seized him from behind. He reached for the Ashbringer, but the weapon slipped from his hand, falling blade down into the dirt. Calling upon the light, he screamed for deliverance. The heavens answered. A bolt of lightning surged down and eliminated the monster where it stood, reducing it to scorched ash. Alexandros collapsed to his knees, panting. "It is finished." Then, agony. A sharp pain burst through his chest. He looked down and saw it. Ashbringer, its sacred glow now turned against him. He turned, eyes wide in disbelief, heart shattering. "Renault? Renault!" Alexandros gasped. His son stood behind him, hands trembling, tears streaming down his face. "I was wrong about you, boy." You're nothing like me, Alexandros said before falling forward onto the ground, the light leaving his eyes. I don't want to be you. I'll be greater than you ever were. Now I can become the man you never thought I would be. Renault screamed, voice raw with confusion and pain. And then, his breath ragged, his face stricken with fear, he turned and ran, fleeing into the dying light of day and into the shadow of what he had done. At Tyr's hand, the Knights of the Silver Hand stood before the town's leader as his guards waited outside. The Silver Hand's message was clear: unity in the face of annihilation. This was not simply an offer of support, but a solemn pact, an invitation to stand shoulder to shoulder against the Scourge. We are all brothers in the light, Lord Valdemar. From this day forward, the good people of Tyr's Hand may count on the Knights of the Silver Hand as trusted allies, General Abendis said, shaking the town leader's hand. Just as the handshake finished, a scout burst through the hall doors, breathless and wide-eyed. High Lord Mograine has been killed, along with Fairbanks, en route from Tirisfall to Hearthglen. The room froze. The news struck like a hammer. Gasps, stifled cries, and stunned silence filled the chamber. The paladins looked to one another in disbelief. Darion Mograine stood at the rear of the chamber, his features contorted with disbelief. General Abendis turned slowly to him. If this is indeed true, Darion, I'm... Darion? But Darion was already gone. At Hearthglen, the air inside the war hall was thick with tension as the sun had begun to dip behind the towers. Around the central table stood General Abendis, Bridget Abendis, Maxwell Tyrosus, and Satan. They had gathered to discuss the weight of this tragedy. The death of Alexandros demands justice. None would dispute this. Yet I say to you that we lack sufficient numbers to mount an offensive against the Scourge, Satan said. Tyrosus immediately shot back, passion rising in his voice. All the more reason to recruit outside our own race, outside our own faction if need be. Nonsense, General Abendis barked. Is it truly? Tyrosus said, turning toward him. The Scourge is a threat to all life, Abendis, not just humanity. Bridget stepped forward, her voice cold and unwavering. The purity of the Order will never be fouled by the unclean. As the debate flared, the doors burst open. 2 guards entered, struggling to support a man whose robes were torn and body weak, but whose eyes burned with furious purpose. You! It was you, Renault, that killed Alexandros. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. The Ashbringer thrust through your father's back. Gasps rippled through the room as all eyes turned to Renault. He stood stunned, then quickly tried to compose himself, voice controlled yet tight. Fairbanks, I'm happy to see that you survived, but I fear the trauma you suffered has addled your mind. But Fairbanks' eyes, blazing with fury and pain, never left him. I know what I saw, you traitorous bastard. Silence fell again, this time heavier than before, as Fairbanks sagged in the guards' arms, still glaring at Renault with a fire that could not be extinguished. Satan's voice cut cleanly through the stillness, though his expression remained composed, almost gentle. And I say to you that the boy was ill and in my care. Perhaps we should inquire as to just how it is that you managed to survive. At the very least, you have been directly exposed to the plague. Knights, ensure that Brother Fairbanks is quarantined. I will see to his welfare personally. The guards immediately moved to obey, gripping Fairbanks more firmly. He fought them, defiant and enraged. I will not be silenced, Lord Commander. If you vouch for the boy, then perhaps the whelp did not act alone. The guard struggled to contain him, dragging him across the hall. Unhand me, damn you! I'm not infected! I'm not infected! His shouts echoed off the chamber walls long after he was gone. Maxwell Tyrosus stepped forward, his gaze narrowing as it fixed on Satan. You say that Alexandros was killed by a multitude of undead. Yet on our return from the monastery we could find no sign of such a battle. Not a single Scourge corpse. Satan met the paladin's doubt with unwavering composure. Turned to ash, no doubt, and scattered by the wind. We owe you no further explanation, Maxwell. Your talk already borders on treason. Now, you either set yourself with us or against us. What's it to be? Tyrosus' mouth tightened. If Alexandros were here, he would listen to reason. But I fear that reason has abandoned the lot of you in favor of blind zealotry. We are taking our leave of the Order and what it has become. Those among you who share our concern may join us at any time. For those who remain, if you do not rediscover the true teachings of the light, then you will surely be damned." The last thing Alexandros Mograine remembered was the searing agony of betrayal. His son's face, the last thing he saw before darkness claimed him. And yet, he was not gone. He now stood alone in front of his old house he shared with his wife and 2 boys. The wind whispering through overgrown grass, his boots planted before a weather-worn headstone. His wife's name, Elena Mograine, was etched into the stone. His voice broke the silence, wary and trembling. "Elena, I need you. My thoughts, my emotions all seem disconnected. I feel as though I am losing myself, as if my soul has been cast adrift." The wind shifted. A voice came, not from behind nor ahead, but from within the still air itself. A woman's voice, familiar, haunting. "Who do you love?" He answered without hesitation, heart aching. "I love you, Elena. I have always loved you." Suddenly, the ground split open with a sharp crack. A skeletal hand burst from the earth and latched around his wrist like iron. Before Alexandros could react, the skeletal hand of his wife closed around his neck, holding him in place as her decayed form faced him eye to eye, empty sockets staring where once her beautiful eyes had shone. She gripped his head, pulling his gaze into hers. "I could never love you," she snarled. "Love is nothing but a childish fantasy. Learn this lesson and learn it well. Hatred and despair are the only truths of existence. I harbor only resentment for you, and for your precious Darion, the cursed filth who stole my life." The world twisted around him. Suddenly he was running, carrying Darion in his arms to the river to hopefully have him take his first breath. The boy's body was limp, cold. Panic choked his breath as he rushed to the riverbank, dropping to his knees and cradling his son. Dipping Darion into the water, the cries of his son graced his ears. "It's a miracle!" Alexandros gasped, clutching Darion close. Then, the voice again. "Who do you love?" "I love you, Darion!" he cried, his voice raw with emotion. But hope shattered in an instant. Hands surged from the water, pale and wet, clawing at Darion. They dragged the boy under. "No, you can't have him, not Darion, not my son!" Alexandros screamed, plunging his arms into the water in vain. Darkness fell again. He blinked, and he was back in front of Stratholme, pain exploding in his chest as the Ashbringer was again embedded in his back. Bloodless, breathless, he fell to his knees. "Who do you love?" the voice whispered once more. He turned, trembling. Renault stood behind him. "I loved you, Renault." But there was no kindness in Renault's eyes, only fury. "I hate you. I hate you, and if I could kill you again, I would. You made me what I am." Alexandros collapsed, repeating the same word over and over through clenched teeth. "No, no, no." And then he awoke. Metal scraped against stone, chains clinked and stretched. Alexandros was strapped to a cold stone table, his body pale and stiff. His eyes were a ghostly white, the wound in his chest visible but dry. Around him was a chamber unlike any he had ever seen. Bone and frost, steel and sorcery. A towering skeletal figure loomed before him, clad in regal purple robes lined with gold. Blue flame flickered within the skull where eyes should have been. The room pulsed with necromantic power. "Further resistance is pointless. Your will is no longer your own. If it is any consolation, you fought the change longer than any before you. Now tell me, Alexandros Mograine, who do you love?" the Lich asked. Alexandros opened his mouth but managed only a breath. The Lich placed a bony hand over his mouth. "Who do you love?" he asked again. Alexandros answered, dead and cold. "No one." "Who loves you?" "No one." The Lich straightened, satisfied. "Good. You are ready to take the next step. Welcome to Naxxramas. I am the hammer that will forge you Death Knight. I am Kel'Thuzad." The chains creaked. Alexandros looked around. At the end of the table he lay on, he saw a face he knew once. Korthaz, once a paladin of Uther, But clearly not anymore. The dwarf he knew before is gone, replaced with a Death Knight, eyes glowing and loyal to the Scourge. Bones and ancient remains filled the chamber like trophies. On the wall before him hung a massive dragon skull, a thick chain still attached to its maw. Murmurs from the other Death Knights echoed through the room. Then Kel'Thuzad raised his hand. "Silence! Listen well. Whatever purpose may have driven you in life is now meaningless. All of your former allegiances, your memories, your loyalties are now cast to the void. You are to be a vessel of annihilation, a harbinger of the apocalypse. All that remains for you now is to grasp the sword and seal the pact." From the shadows, the Ashbringer, corrupted and blackened, rose into the air before him. It pulsed with dark energy, its holy glow twisted into something cold and cruel. Alexandros, no longer truly alive, felt the power flood his limbs. With strength not his own, he snapped the chains binding him and stood. The corrupted Ashbringer drifted into his waiting grasp. He stepped forward, one slow stride at a time, now fully armored. The sword glowed in his hands, its crimson hue casting harsh light across his face. Kel'Thuzad watched with pride. "You are the sword's strength, Alexandros, and it is yours. Now, the mighty Ashbringer, man and sword once considered the greatest enemy of the Scourge, will be its most terrifying weapon. Now, all who know will come to fear the newest, greatest champion of the Lich King." The moon hung full over Tirisfal, casting pale light through the shattered clouds above the monastery. Within its quiet halls, the chapel was cloaked in a haunting serenity. Moonlight spilled through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the stone floor. Holy images now touched with a surreal shifting glow. Renault Mograine stood alone before them, arms hanging to his side, his expression unreadable as he gazed through the fractured colors. The light reflected off the window panes painted him in gentle hues, blue, gold, crimson, each one a flicker of meaning, a moment in a life now changed forever. Behind him, soft footsteps echoed across the chapel floor. Satan approached, his voice calm, measured, almost soothing. "What you did was for the best. You know that, don't you? You have served the Order well, Renault. I'm proud of you." Before Renault could reply, another voice came from the shadows. "Are you ready to begin?" Renault nodded once, yes. Satan echoed the word, yes. Together they stepped forward into the heart of the chapel where an altar awaited them. Waiting there, prepared to begin the rite, was Asilian. He raised his arms and began the ritual in a voice solemn and clear. "In the light we gather to empower our brother. In its grace he will be made anew. In its power he shall educate the masses. In its strength he shall combat the shadow." Turning to Satan with reverence, he continued, "Lord Commander Dothrhan, if you deem Renault Mograine worthy, I ask you to place your blessing upon him." Satan stepped forward, a ceremonial cape in his hands, blue with gold trim. As he draped it across Renault's shoulders, his voice rang through the chamber. "By the grace of the light, may your brethren be healed. By the strength of the light, may your enemies be undone." A hush fell, the ceremony neared its end. Asilian's voice rose once more, filled with finality and purpose. "Do you vow to uphold the honor and codes of our new order, and to cleanse the world of corruption wherever it may be found?" Renault, standing tall and newly cloaked in the authority of the order, answered with confidence, "I do." Asilian lifted his arms to the assembly. "Then join me, brothers, in welcoming Renault Mograine, the first commander to be promoted within the ranks of the Scarlet Crusade." The chapel erupted in thunderous applause and echoing chants. In the flickering candlelight beneath stained glass depictions of the light's judgment, Renault Mograine stood renewed, not just as a son of the Silver Hand, but now as a commander of a new crusade, one born of conviction and shadow. At Brill, Scourge roamed the crumbling ruins, but not for long. Darion Mograine moved like a storm through them, blade flashing with righteous fury. Each swing of his sword ended another cursed creature, severing heads from shoulders and limbs from torsos. Breathing heavy, he let out a yell into the heavens, ragged with grief. "Light, damn you! All I wish is to be left alone. I have dedicated my life to the light because I believed in a greater purpose. So tell me, what greater purpose was served with my father's death? Why did you bring me back after Stratholme?" He raised his eyes to the sky. He searched the heavens for an answer. Any sign, any whisper from the light he had devoted himself to. But the skies gave no reply, just silence. Then, rustling. A voice emerged from the underbrush behind him, low and curious. "What if your father not be dead?" Darion spun around, sword half raised. "Who speaks?" he demanded. From the bushes stepped a troll, hands open in peace. He was robed, barefoot, and strange in presence, like a man both wild and deeply in tune with something unseen. The troll introduced himself as Zabra, telling Darion that he doesn't think his father's spirit is gone. Darion stared at him, wary but curious. Zabra continued. He told of how Alexandros had once saved his life at the monastery. Since then, the light had tied them together, however faintly. That bond, he said, had not been broken, but merely clouded. With a gesture, Zabra led Darion through the ruined hills beyond Brill, eventually arriving at a small camp nestled in the trees. The two began to talk. Zabra explained that he dreamed of this place, and while unsure why the light led him there, he followed, but now he knows. He also dreamed of another place, a fortress floating above a burning city. Darion's eyes widened. "Stratholme. Then I shall go to this fortress and free my father." But Zabra's expression grew grim, saying it is best to go with others if he is to choose that path. Before Darion could respond, a new voice called out from behind him. "I found him! What are you doing out here alone, human?" He turned, blade ready once more, but lowered it when he saw a female orc standing in front of him. "I'm Grunhilda," she said simply. But Zabra was gone, vanished like smoke in the wind. Darion blinked, looking past her. Then his gaze shifted to a group moving from the tree line, armor gleaming with unfamiliar sigils. Among them stood humans, dwarves, night elves, and Maxwell Tyrosus. Tyrosus smiled faintly. "We've split from the Order, Darion. We've formed a new organization, one that welcomes all races. I wondered if you might like to join us." Darion looked from face to face, each one worn but resolute. The hatred that had poisoned the Order at Hearthclan was gone from these warriors. They stood together not in judgment but in purpose. He gave a quiet nod. Tyrosus stepped forward and offered a folded cloth, a tabard, black with gray trim. A gray circle sat at its center, rimmed with golden triangles like rays of a dawning sun. "Good, good. It is my great honor then to welcome you, Darion Mograine, son of High Lord Mograine the Ashbringer, to the Order of the Argent Dawn." And that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thanks for checking it out. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.